My name is Kevin O'Keefe. I am a Doctor of Psychology, or PSYD. I am the Program Director at the Florida Institute for Neurologic Rehabilitation. I'm also responsible for monitoring and supervising the neuropsychology department. A lot of people, when they come here, they are wondering what neuropsychology is and what neuropsychological testing involves. And basically what we do is we look at individuals after they had some kind of a neurologic injury, and we try to figure out what their strengths and deficits are. You know, what areas of the brain are working and what areas aren't. For example, a lot of times when somebody's had an injury, they may have paralysis on one side of their body, and generally what that means is that the opposite side of the brain has been injured. Neuropsychological testing basically involves us using some standardized questions that we ask the individual that have been basically asked over and over again to multiple people, so we have some kind of idea of how normal people, quote unquote normal people, answer these questions. And then we also compare it to people that have known injuries so that we can see where they rank in comparison to other people that have similar type injuries. The brain's specialized. We have a left hemisphere, we have a right hemisphere, and each hemisphere is specialized in different ways. The left hemisphere is typically responsible for analyzing speech, language, our ability to speak intelligibly. The right hemisphere is generally responsible for making sense of visual information or non-speech type sounds, such as melodies or tone of voice. When we test people, we ask them questions that elicit responses from these different areas of the brain so that we can see if they have deficits in their speech area of the brain, if they have deficits in the visual area of the brain, if they have deficits in the problem-solving area of the brain. In general, the further away the person is from their date of injury, the more accurately we can define what the actual deficits are and what they might mean for their long-term functioning. Whether they're going to be able to live independently, whether they're going to be able to go back to work, whether they need to have a guardian, somebody that's able to help them making decisions so that they can protect their person and property. When we test them sooner to the date of the injury, a lot of times we get this kind of generalized level of dysfunction that doesn't tell us a whole lot other than the brain's confused right now. It's kind of scrambled, I like to say, and it takes a little while for those deficits to start to settle down. And as they go through the rehabilitation process and as they basically just have time from the injury itself, the responses become more reflective of what their actual strengths and weaknesses are. Serial neuropsychological testing is helpful because it helps us track how the person's recovery is going, what the progression is. A lot of times when we see people that have had a neurologic injury, one of the first things that happens is they are what appear to be very severe deficits. With time and with further evaluation, you tend to see that those deficits lessen, that they become stronger in areas, and at some point they start to plateau or level off, and then you know that they basically have gotten about as far as they're going to get in terms of their recovery, and that's when you can make those long-term predictions as to what further care they may need. When we take the information from the neuropsychological testing, a lot of times we will share it with the professionals that are working with the individual, the physicians, the speech therapist, occupational therapist, physical therapist. We also give feedback to the individual and their family so that they have a better idea of what strengths and weaknesses the person has and how best to interact with them. A lot of times, if you find out that the person has difficulties interpreting language, what you might need to do is, instead of asking them to do something, you may need to demonstrate it, by basically going through the motions yourself and asking them to copy you. And that way they're better able to understand what's being asked of them rather than just being given a specific spoken command. Sometimes if they have memory difficulties, it's important to repeat the information over and over again and ask them to repeat it back to you so you can see that they've had a chance to register it and start to understand what they need to do. Almost everyone that comes here to the Florida Institute does have neuropsychological testing, at least initially. Sometimes it may be delayed because there are times when we have individuals that come to us and they may have just completed a neuropsychological evaluation prior to admission, in which case we want to wait a little bit before we test them again. Sometimes they have difficulties in their social interactions and their ability to control their own behaviors, and they may have been psychiatrically hospitalized or been arrested and gone to jail at times, and we have to provide them with the structure and security that they can be more independent. And those individuals may not need as frequent neuropsychological evaluation because they are further out from the injury. But what we want to see is how stable their functioning is, and if they've had any deficits that have reoccurred, or potentially they may have been injured again, in between the initial injury and the time that they come to see us. One of the unique things in a setting like this, because we do have the individuals here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, is we're able to bring in a lot of information as to how the person functions outside of structured structured testing itself. We can spread out the testing over several days. A lot of times with